listener production.
Hello, happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sacha Barbagat. It comes but once every 4 years, except for the 2020 Games, which were delayed by COVID. I'm talking, of course, about the Olympics. Ahead of tomorrow morning's opening ceremony, Bension and I sat down to chat everything you need to know about the 33rd Olympiad. That is coming up in the second half of The Briefing. First, though, it is time for the headlines with Katrina Blowers. It's Friday, July 26.
Hello, everyone. Well, we are starting off in Paris with the headlines today, and it's a bit of a spoiler alert for the Matildas game. If you're looking to watch it later, shut your ears now. The Aussie Women's Olympics campaign, I'm afraid, has gotten off to a rocky start.
Very few chances created by the Matildas, who have it all to do against Zambia and the United States in the next two games in Group B. Germany just too good.
That audio courtesy of the Nine Network. The Aussie women going down to Germany 3-0 in their opening group game. Next up is Zambia on Monday morning and then the USA on Thursday.
Yeah, disappointing start, but all to play for the Matildas. We're still backing them. We turn now, Katrina, to the pool where an Australian coach is facing being sent home after declaring he wanted a South Korean swimmer to beat two Aussies. Now, this comes from Nine newspapers. Michael Palfrey reportedly made the comments during a poolside interview with South Korean journalists. Head coach of the Dolphins, Rowan Taylor, has labelled the comments un-Australian. He'll now be forced to decide whether Palfrey stays on and what impact that could have on the four swimmers Palfrey is currently training for the Games.
Yeah, pretty wild reported comments there. He did used to train that South Korean swimmer as well. So, you know, that's sort of the implication there is that he was favouring his former protege over his current ones. But speaking of Nine newspapers, journalists have voted to strike after the publisher didn't come to the table with union members' requests for a pay rise. So this affects the writers at the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, the Australian Financial Review, Brisbane Times and WA Today. They will walk off the job at 11 a.m. on the eve of the official start of the Olympics. This is significant because Nine has the rights to the 2024 Games. Sacha, initially on the table, it was a 2% pay rise. Executives are then said to have come back to journalists with a 3.5% increase, but they voted against it, saying not good enough. And yeah, we're going to down tools this morning.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that affects any sort of Olympics coverage. They did send 18 writers over as part of the contingency to report on the Games, so might not impact it at all, but still a significant announcement from these journalists. Look, I want to lighten the mood a little bit, really, but with very serious news. There's an egg shortage at the Athletes' Village in Paris. Now, spare a thought for the athletes, but in all seriousness, eggs are one of the biggest sources of protein, and athletes from every walk of sport, would survive on these, especially when they're in their peak competition phase. Apparently they were rationed at breakfast yesterday, and there were some complaints from some of the athletes. The caterers have said they underestimated the demand. I don't know how you do that, but they will be able to meet it. So they're just going to have to order a few more in. And hey, like we've talked about the competition starting for some Aussies, but it really does officially get underway tomorrow morning at 3:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. That's when the opening ceremony will kick off. And of course, we talk all about it and what else to expect at the Olympics in our deep dive coming up later.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has just met with US President Joe Biden, whose government has a close-knit and supportive relationship with Israel. It is expected that Biden will work for Netanyahu's agreement to the first of a three-part deal that would see Hamas release further hostages from the October 7 attack for a temporary ceasefire. Interestingly, then Netanyahu will meet with Vice President Harris separately later on today. Read into that what you will. That is expected to be an important meeting given that Harris is now running for president and that she missed Netanyahu's joint address to the US Congress. Sacha, a VP normally would be present at that, but it is interesting that they are having separate meetings.
Yeah, and look, also in US politics today, there is speculation that Barack Obama is about to come out and formally endorse Kamala Harris for the presidential nominee for the Democrats. Now, he has not given any official word yet. He put out a statement saying he wanted a fair process to find the best possible candidate. There's been reports that he doesn't think that Kamala can actually beat Donald Trump in November, but now there are claims that he is going to come out and say, I do endorse Kamala. We can expect that soon, apparently. And we've also got an update on the FBI's investigation into the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. So the director has come out and publicly questioned whether Trump was actually hit by a bullet. There's a theory that it was actually shrapnel that cut his ear. He's been absolutely criticised for coming out and saying this by members of the Republican Party, but that is going to form part of the investigation. A landmark court ruling has declared there isn't enough evidence that controversial weed killer Roundup gives people cancer. This has been the subject of a major class action launched by hundreds of Australians who alleged the product's active ingredient causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Roundup is used everywhere, from home gardens to industrial agriculture, but its makers insist it is safe. The case against manufacturers, Bayer and Monsanto, has now been dismissed.
Yeah, this has been incredibly controversial, even among, Australian farmers. You've got the head of Grain Producers Australia coming out saying that he's used it for 40 years and it's one of the greatest tools invested in his time of farming, and that if it was banned, that he really feared for the future of food production. The judge who presided over this case said that scientists are split as well on the safety and more research is needed. So Bayer and Monsanto have faced multiple lawsuits and have had to pay out, billions of dollars to settle these lawsuits, which they say they'll now be appealing. And the Barbie movie has been praised for doing a lot of things, inspiring women, shining a light on the patriarchy, and giving us this banger. I'm just kidding, anywhere else I'd be 10. There you go. But it turns out it might also have helped more women understand their own bodies. Recent analysis found searches related to gynecology. Now, that is the area of health dedicated to female reproduction, surged more than 50% in the week after Barbie premiered in July last year. Experts think it could be off the back of the final scene in the film when Barbie, who at that point is now in the real world, declares she's off to see her gynecologist. And Sacha, I was looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it could be seen in that way of helping women understand their own bodies, but I'd say most women would know what a gynecologist is. I reckon the bulk of those searches was blokes going, what is a gynecologist?
Yes, actually, they did look into this in the research, and that was one of the theories as well of the researchers who said, maybe it's people who it's men or kids even who have watched this and gone, what the hell is that? Especially because it's the final scene of the movie, so that's the part that stays with you once you've walked out of the cinema. But they did find that the searches for what is a gynecologist wasn't as high compared to gynecology or gynecologist, just as the search word. So it's indecisive, but I still think, anytime we see people getting more educated about health and their bodies, whether they're man, woman or child, is really wonderful. Hey, it's also not the first time. This isn't like a new phenomenon. We've seen this happen a lot where something happens in pop culture or a celeb does something and all of a sudden the world goes, oh, what is that? I should learn more. We saw Katie Couric, who was the former Today host, live stream her colonoscopy in the year 2000. That increased colonoscopies by 21% shortly after. We saw Angelina Jolie publish an essay on having breast cancer. That led to a 64% increase in genetic testing. And of course, just this year, King Charles caused a surge in searches for enlarged prostate after revealing he'd had a check in January. So, celebs, we often can give them a bit of a hard time, but if they do go public with this sort of stuff, the public sits up and pays attention. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, who would have thought that King Charles would ever be associated with internet searches for enlarged prostate? But, good on him. He is doing a good thing for the health of men in the world.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you so much for that, Katrina. Next up, we're getting into my chat with Bension, where we break down everything you need to know about the 2024 Paris Games.
Hey, it's Bension here. Tomorrow morning, bright and early, the 2024 Paris Olympics get underway. The start of the Olympics is always an exciting and much celebrated global moment. And with those kinds of feelings few and far between at the moment in the news, we should talk about it. Sacha is here with us to take us through everything we need to know about the Games. Hey, Sash.
Hey, Bension.
So tell us first about the build-up. How has Paris prepared for the 2024 Olympic Games?
Yeah, so it's been 100 years since Paris last held the Games, so a lot has changed in that time. We're going to have 10,500 athletes who have already started to descend on Paris. They're competing in 32 sports across 329 medal events. It's a huge event, obviously, and much bigger than it was 100 years ago. 11.5 million tourists are expected to be in Paris for the Games. Wow. Now, we already know how busy a summer in Europe is, especially Paris. It's one of the most visited cities in the continent. And numbers are actually lower than they were expecting for the Olympics, but they've managed to do pretty well with ticket sales. Now, in terms of how they've prepared, I think the biggest one that we first have to talk about is the River Seine. Now, the organisers and the government said, we are going to make the Seine swimmable. It hasn't been swimmable in over 100 years. We want certain events for swimming to be held safely in the water and our athletes swimming up and down the river. Now, in mid-June, they tested E. coli levels in the water, and they were apparently 10 times more than the acceptable level. But
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. But there is a but. Games organisers have hopes that, the July sunshine will help. And also they've installed like a rainwater storage basin that they're hoping is going to make the water clear enough. We did see Paris's mayor take a dip in the water last week and she was all smiles as she was in there. So they are pushing ahead with swimmers in the Seine. In terms of construction as well, we often think about huge new centres being built, Olympic parks being constructed for host cities and by host cities. Interestingly, they've only built 2 new venues for the Paris Games, and they've only spent, when I say only, 15 billion AUD, which obviously is a lot, but for the first time in a long time, they're expected to make back all of that and even potentially turn a bit of a profit. So that's quite hard to do when it comes to Olympic Games, and that's really impressive. Tokyo, which was our last Games, which was only 3 years ago, they were affected by ticket sales because of COVID. They couldn't have lots of crowds in attendance, so that didn't help the Tokyo Games. But in terms of being able to turn a profit, that's pretty impressive if they do manage to pull that off. And of course, we can't forget the way that our athletes are prepped. And I'm talking about condoms, of course. 300,000 have been brought in for the Paris Games. That's the equivalent of almost 2 a day per athlete. And I found some stats about what's been brought in for the Aussies. 1.4 tonnes of cereal has been sent over from Australia, as well as 20,000 shots of coffee and air conditioning, because in a bid to be sustainable, they did not install aircon in the athletes' village. But the Aussie team decided, for health and safety reasons, we're going to get AC in for our athletes. A few other countries are doing that as well. So big preparations. I think Paris has tried to be sustainable, not only for the environment, but also for their bank accounts as well. So that's going to be a big key part of the 2024 Paris Games.
Okay, so tell us about the opening ceremony. What can we expect to see?
I think the most exciting and interesting point of difference is that it's not going to be held in a stadium. This is the first time ever that's happening. It's going to be along the River Seine, the much contested brown water. It's safe to ride a boat down, so that's what they're going to do. It's going to be a parade of boats, and the athletes are going to ride on these boats down the River Seine. I reckon if they pull it off, it's going to look spectacular. It'll be absolutely beautiful. 325,000 spectators are expected to line the banks for this event. They've built grandstands along the banks, but also across some of the bridges as well. Now, performers. It's still a mystery. We will, of course, find out in the early hours of tomorrow morning, but there have been rumours of Lady Gaga and Celine Dion, as well as French singer Aya Nakamura. As well as this, bars across the city have been cleared to stay open all night long, so they're trying to make it a real party atmosphere.
Excellent. What about the Aussies leading our team? Who are they?
Yes, we found this out this week. Jess Fox, who competes in the canoe slalom, she is into her 4th Games this Games. She has 4 medals. She's already won gold. She'll be going for it again in 2024. Interestingly, she was born in France as well, so she's got a nice little connection to the host city and the host country. For the men, we have Eddie Ockenden. He plays hockey for the Kookaburras. He's the first Tasmanian to lead the team out, which is exciting. This is his 5th Games. He's going for gold for the first time in Paris. He has won 3 medals, but gold has eluded him. And of course, both have talked about what a great honour it is. So they're both really excited.
So which events kick off the Australian campaign, and importantly, which ones are we expected to do really well in?
Yep, good question. Well, we're actually already underway. Our rugby men's sevens have already qualified for the quarters. They run a few events early for pure logistical reasons. It's too hard to cram it all into 2 weeks. The Matildas also got their campaign underway this morning. There was women's handball that started, but Australia hasn't qualified. One of the few events Australia hasn't qualified for. And the Aussies are going to be in action in 42 of the 45 events, which is super exciting. Now, in terms of placing, you can't ignore our swim squad. Swimming is our biggest sport at the Olympics. Most games, we always do really well in it. But interestingly as well, in the athletics, we have the biggest team we've ever fielded at an Olympics with 86 people in the squad. One to watch, Jessica Hull. She, this month, absolutely smashed the world record in the 2,000 metres. This was at a different event, obviously. She'll be racing in the 1,500 metres at the Olympics, so keep an eye on her. The Boomers in the basketball, they are hoping to back up an impressive performance at Tokyo, where they won their maiden medal. Now for the women, the Opals, they've consistently placed, so there's high hopes for them as well. Jess Fox, speaking of our flag bearer, she is one of the most decorated competitors of all time. She's already won 4 and she's hoping to add to that again in 2024. A few other sports to keep an eye on where we've got good chances. We've got our BMX team, track cycling, diving, equestrian, hockey, rowing, rugby sevens, which I already mentioned, sailing, skateboarding, surfing. In terms of the Matildas placing, they're a decent chance, but they've got a bit of a tough group stages to get through first. They'll also be without superstar Sam Kerr. And in the tennis, we've got a good team. Ajla Tomljanovic and Alex de Minaur are going to be competing for Australia. The Demon has had a massively quick turnaround. He crashed out of Wimbledon just the other week with a freak hip injury, and now he's in to compete at the Olympics. So they'll be fun to watch as well.
Tell us about some of the new sports that we're going to see at this Olympics.
Yeah, so this year there's just the one. It's breakdancing, or breaking is the official term. Our team is Rachel Raygun Gunn and Jeff J Attack Dunn. So that'll be really fun to watch. Sadly, though, breaking's been dropped for the 2028 Games in LA, so this might be a one-off. So if you want to see breakdancing at the Olympics, make sure you're watching this year. And we saw surfing, skateboarding and sport climbing. They were added to the Tokyo Games and are returning for these Olympics as well.
Importantly, let's talk about the time difference so that people know what they need to do. Is it going to be hard for us back home to watch these events?
They're going to mainly be taking place between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. So we will get a little bit of a crossover in the evening where, you can watch before you go to bed. And then I guess the good thing is the next day when you get home from work and you're waiting for the next day's events to start, you can catch up on everything that happened beforehand. So it's not too bad. The opening ceremony is rough, though. I don't see too many people waking up at 3:30 for that. Channel 9 has the rights for this Games, so they'll be streaming it on all their platforms. platforms and on the telly on their free-to-air channel. And Stan as well has the rights for streaming services.
Where do you think Australia is going to rank on the medal tally? Give us your prediction.
Okay, well, I found some data analysts, they're called Grace Note, and they predicted Australia will claim 13 golds as part of a haul of 48 medals and will finish 5th behind the USA, China, Great Britain and hosts France, of course. I'm going to go a couple better. I'm putting us up to 16 gold. I reckon we can equal our record in Sydney, which was 16 back in 2000. And I reckon we might edge up into 4th. And let me just say, I am in no way, shape or form qualified to predict final Olympic medal tallies, but I have been absolutely stuck into Olympic stuff all day today, and that's my call. I think it's going to be a really great games, especially because Tokyo was sadly heavily impacted by COVID. It was delayed by a year. People couldn't watch properly. It would have been really difficult for athletes to not have that vibe and that excitement around them. So I think the Paris 2024 games are just going to be a lot of fun to watch. So yeah, I know what I'll be doing for the next 2 weeks.
Sounds like a great fun time, whatever happens. Sacha, thanks so much for joining us again.
Thanks, Bension.
So it all kicks off at 3:30 tomorrow morning if you're on the East Coast, or 1:30 if you're in WA. And we will, of course, be tracking this whole thing for the next couple of weeks. That's it for this episode of The Briefing. Before you go, though, we'd love it if you could share this app with someone you think might enjoy it. And if you want to keep up with our other content, check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and on TikTok and YouTube, just search Listener Newsroom. And we'll be back in your feed with another ep this afternoon from 3. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.
Listener.